Lyddie, Chapter 15, Rachel. She told no one about the money. She wanted to tell Diana. Diana, she knew, would rejoice with her, but decided to wait. She was so close now to having the money she needed, and when she did, she would surprise Diana by signing the petition. Then, not more than a week after Luke had brought the money, she had a second visitor who turned her life upside down. She left the bedroom door open, trying to encourage a faint breeze through a stuffy room while she washed out her stockings and underwear in the basin. Suddenly, she was aware of Tim, standing in the doorway. She looked up from her washing. "There's a visitor in the parlor, Ma says to tell you. A gentleman." "Charlie!" She was so sure it must be he, all grown up to be a gentleman, for who else would come to see her? She could hardly count Luke Stevens. She squeezed the water from her laundry and hastily wiped her hands upon her apron and ran down the stairs. But it wasn't Charlie waiting in the corner in the dining room that Miss Bedlaw had called the parlor. Nor was it Luke. She wondered why Tim had called him a gentleman at all. At first, she was sure he was a stranger. He seemed so out of place in a room that was neatly dressed, chattering factory girls, this short man, very thin, and a weathered face and homespun clothes of a hill farmer. "Don't you know your uncle, eh?" a man asked. At the same moment, she recognized him from Judah, Aunt Clarissa's husband, whom she hadn't seen since she was a small thing. "Made it in 2 days," he boasted. "Slept right in the wagon." She tried to smile, but her heart was beating like a turning blade against her breast. What could have brought him here? Anything to do with Clarissa had always spelled trouble. "What's the matter?" She spoke quietly, but she could, feeling every eye in the crowd of the parlor turn their way. "Why have you come?" He sobered at once, as though remembering the solemn duty. "Your Aunt Clarissa thought you need to be told." "Told what?" A chill went through her. "Your ma's never been stout, you know." "A fever? Did she catch a fever?" He glanced around at the girls seated in the room, who were pretending not to listen, but whose ears stooped, alert as wild creatures in the meadow. He lowered his voice, tapping his head. "Stout up here, eh?" Lyddie stared at him. What had they done to her mother? Judah dropped his eyes uncomfortably under her stare. "So we've been obliged. What have you done to my mother?" she whispered fiercely. "We've been obliged to remand her to Battleboro, to the asylum there." "But that's for crazy folk." Judah put on a face of hound dog sorrow and sighed deeply. "It were just too much care for poor Clarissa, delicate as she be. Why didn't you ask me? I'd been responsible for her before. I can do it." He cocked his head. "You weren't there, eh? Where's Rachel? What have you done with the baby?" "Why," he said, relieved to have gotten off the subject of his mother, "why, she be just fine, right out in the wagon. I brung her to you." Lyddie brushed past him out the door. The farm wagon stood outside. The patient oxen, oblivious to how comically out of place they looked in a city street, chewed their cuds contentedly. For all the stuffiness upstairs, it was damp and chilly down on the street, and Rachel was shivering on the bench of the wagon, wrapped in a worn shawl that Lyddie recognized as her mother's. She climbed up onto the wagon step and lifted the child down. Lyddie was too light, boneless as a rag doll. As Lyddie went up the steps of the boarding house, she could feel the tiny burden trembling through the shawl. "It's all right, Rachie. It's me. It's Lyddie," she said, hoping the child could remember. She carried Rachel inside to where Judah had stood, nervously pinching the rim of his sweat-stained hat. "It's your sister, Rachie," Judy boomed out, his voice fake with a hearty cheer. A gasp went from the girls in the parlor. "Like Aunt Clarissy told you, eh? We brung you to Lyddie. Have you gotten her things?" In answer, he went out to the wagon and brought back a sack with a small lump of at the bottom. "What about my mother's things?" she asked coldly, no longer caring about the audience and what they had heard. "There weren't hardly nothin'," he said. "She let it go. She was nearly right. Well," he said, looked up from one sister to another, "I'll be off then, eh? I'm coming to fetch our mother, soon as I can, as soon as I can pay off the debt. I'll take her back to home and care for her myself." He turned at the door, his hat brim rolled tight and squeezed in his big hands. "Back where?" "Home," she repeated, "to the farm." "We be sellin' it," he said. "We got to have the money for Battleboro." "No!" Her voice was sharp. so sharp that the room full of girls stopped everything they were doing to stare. Even Rachel twisted in her arms to look at her with alarm. She went close to Judah and lowered her voice again in a fierce whisper. No one can sell that land except for my father. He gave me permission. How? She was seized with wild hope. Her father! They had heard from him. When? Before he left. He had it wrote out and put in his mark in case, or put in mark it. He had it wrote out and put his mark to it in case a. She wanted to scream at him, but how could she? How had she? She had already frightened Rachel. You got no right, she said between her teeth. We got no choice, the man said stubbornly. We'd be responsible. And he was gone. Once more, Lyddie was aware of the other girls in the room, who were watching her open mouth and gaping at the dirty little bundle in her arms. She buried her face into the shawl. Come on, Rachie, she said, as much to them as to the child. We got to go meet Miss Bedlow. She straightened up tall and made her way through the chairs and the knees in the kitchen. Miss Bedlow, the housekeeper, was sitting in the kitchen rocker, peeling potatoes for tomorrow's hash. What in heaven's name? The housekeeper's sharp question. Rachel's little head came up from the depths of the shawl like a little turtle from a shell. It's Rachel, Miss Bedlow. Lyddie made her voice as gentle as she could. My sister Rachel. She could read the warning in Miss Bedlow's eyes. No men, no children, except the keeper's own, in a corporation house. But surely the woman would not have the heart. I'm begging for a bath for her. She's had a long journey in an ox cart. She's chilled right through. Rachie? Rachie stiffened in her arms, but Miss Bedlow dropped her paring knife into a bowl of peeled potatoes, wiped her hands on her apron, and put a kettle on to boil. It was only after they had both seen Rachel safely asleep in Lyddie's bed that Miss Bedlow said the words that Lyddie knew were on her mind. It won't do, you know. She can't stay here. I'll get her a job. She can doff. You know she's not old enough or strong enough to be a doffer. Just till I can straighten things out, Lyddie pleaded. Please, let her stay. I'll get it all set in just a few days, eh? Miss Bedlow sighed and made to shake her head. I'll pay, of course, full board, and you see how small she is. She won't need her full share. Miss Bedlow sat down and picked her paring knife. Lyddie held her breath. A week. Even then, it won't be more than a fortnight. I give you my vow. I just got to write my brother. Mr. Bedlow looked doubtful, but she didn't say no. She just sighed and started to peel again, the long coil so thin it was almost transparent. I'm obliged to you, Miss Bedlow. I got nowhere to turn else. She mustn't go outdoors. We can't have her seen on the premises. No, I swear. I'll keep her in my room. The other girls won't even know. Miss Bedlow looked at Lyddie Riley. They already know. There's no guarantees they'll keep their peace. I'll beg them. No need to coop her up more than necessary. She can come down with me during the day. I'll have Tim help her with letters and numbers in the afternoon. She ought to be in school herself. She will be, Miss Bedlow. She will be, soon as I can get things worked out. I swear upon my life. You need to watch your language, girl. Set an example for the little one. I thank you, Miss Bedlow. You'll not be sorry, I promise. She wrote Charlie that night after curfew in the flickering light of a forbidden stub of a candle. Dear Brother Charles, I hope you are well. I am sorry to trouble you with sad news, but Uncle Judah came tonight to Lowell and brung Rachel to me. They have to put our mother into the asylum at Battleboro. Now they are thinking to sell the farm. You must go and stop them. You are the man of the family. Judah won't pay me no mind. They got to listen to you. I got more than $100 to the debt. Do not let them sell, Charlie. I beg you. I don't know what to do with Rachel. Children are not allowed in the corporation house. If I can, I will take her home, but I got to have a home to go to. It is up to you, Charlie. Please, I beg you to stop, Uncle Judah. Your loving sister, Lydia Worthen. She could hardly keep her mind on her work, but what was the use of it all anyway if the farm was gone? But it couldn't be, not after all her sweating and saving. And what was she to be with Rachel? The child hadn't spoken a word since her arrival. She hadn't even cried. She seemed more dead than alive. And precious time must be spent finding her a place to stay, and precious money to put her out for keep, if more was to go to school. Why couldn't the children work in the spindle room? There were Irish children down there who looked no older than 7 or 8. They were earning their own way. Hadn't Lyddie herself been working hard since she was no more than a tadpole? And Dolphin wasn't as hard as farm work. Why, those children hardly worked 15 minutes out of the hour, just taking off the spools and replacing them with empty ones. Then they just sat in the corner and played or chatted. Sometimes from the window on a clear day, Lyddie had seen them running about the mill and the yard playing tag or marbles. It was an easy life compared to the farm, and still Rachel would be out of mischief and earning her own way. As if she hadn't enough trouble, Bridget was crying again. Lyddie glanced over her loom. Everything seemed in order, but the Irish girl was standing there, staring at the shuddering machine with tears running down her cheeks. Lyddie quietly checked her own looms before walking over and saying in the girl's ear, "What's the matter with you, eh?" Bridget looked startled. She bit her lip and shook her head. Lyddie shrugged. It was just as well if the girl learned to bear her own troubles. Mr. Marsden stopped Lyddie at the stairs on the way out to breakfast. Her heart nodded. How could he have heard about Rachel already? Had one of the other girls tattled so soon? They were jealous of her, Lyddie knew. She was the best operator on the floor. But it was not about Rachel that Mr. Marsden wished to speak about. It was about the wretched Irish girl. "You must tell her," he said, "that she must get her speed up. I can't keep her on, even as a spare hand, unless she can maintain a proper speed." Why didn't he tell her himself? He was the overseer. Bridget did not belong to her. She hadn't asked for a spare hand, hadn't wanted one, and now he was trying to shove her responsibility off on her. She spoke to Bridget after the break. "He says you'll have to speed up or he can't keep you on." The girl's eyes widened in fear, reminded Lyddie, oh cuss it, of Rachel's silent face, of the child who sat crouched within herself in the corner of Miss Bedloe's kitchen. "Oh, tarnation," she hollered in Bridget's ear. "I'll help you. We'll do the 5 looms together for a few days, just till you get better, eh?" The girl smiled faintly, still frightened. "And keep your mind on the blooming work, you hear? We can't have you catching your hair or being hit in the head by a flying shuttle because because your mind is someplace else." Fresh tears started in the girl's eyes again. She bit her lip and nodded. Lyddie could see Diana smiling approval. Good thing she couldn't hear me, Lyddie thought wryly. She wouldn't be thinking I was so kindly then. By 7 o'clock bell, Bridget looked a little less distraught, and Mr. Marsden came past to pat both girls proudly. Lyddie sighed and hardly bothered to dodge him. She had gotten off the fewest pieces in one day since she had 4 looms, and she still had to go home to the burden of silent Rachel. "Well, it won't do," Miss Bedloe said. "She won't talk either. Tim nor me. Not a word. Just sits trembling in the corner like a frozen mouse." "Did she manage to eat anything?" "Did she manage to eat? She eats like she hasn't eaten food in a month of Sundays. I fed her with Tim. She outate him, and he's a growing boy, but never a word through it all. Just shovels it in like there's never going to be another plateful this side of the grave." Lyddie looked at the housekeeper's face, pinched with anger, and then, down at the top of Rachel's head, the child was trembling, like Oliver, she thought, like Oliver. "For more, that boy will be hung. I know that boy will be hung. Oh, Rachie, I didn't want to think of you hungry. I'll pay you more," she promised Miss Bedloe. "It isn't the money." But it was quite clear to Lyddie that it indeed was the money in addition to the risk, so Lyddie vowed to fetch the payment from the bank the very next day. She had to buy time, at least until she heard from Charlie. When she had finished her own supper, she fetched Rachel from the kitchen, took her out to the privy, and then led her by the hand up the staircase to the bedroom. All of this was accomplished with neither of them saying a word aloud, although inside Lyddie's head lengthy conversations were bouncing out. She tucked the quilt about the child. She tried some of her practice lines out loud. "What did you do today, Rachie? Did Tim make you do some schoolwork? Ain't Miss Bedloe funny? She's all right, eh? Just scared to break a rule? We got to do what the corporation says, you know, 'cause if we don't, we're out of job. And then, what would we do, eh?" There's no answer. She hadn't expected any. Still, "You mustn't be worried, Rachie. Judah can't sell the farm. Charlie and me, we won't let him. We're keeping it for Papa." There was a flicker of life in those eyes. "And Mama, and Charlie and Rachie and Lyddie, too." Did she just imagine the child had relaxed a little against the pillow, or was it a trick of the candlelight? Maybe if she read aloud, as Betsy had to her, she opened Oliver Twist and commenced. When Rachel fell asleep, she didn't know. Lyddie was lost in the comfort of the familiar words. When the bell rang, she blew out the candle and lay in the darkness, feeling the presence of the small body nearby. What could she do? Where could she turn for help? She couldn't keep Rachel here, and yet Lyddie must live in a corporation house and keep her job. And without her job, what could she do for any of them? But how could she put this little lost child out with strangers? She cursed her aunt and uncle. What could they have been thinking to bring the child here? And yet she wasn't better off here with Lyddie, who loved her, or wasn't she better off here with Lyddie, who loved her, than those two, who must not have given her enough to eat? Poor little Rachel, poor old Lyddie. She heaved herself over in bed. She had to sleep. There was nothing she could do until she heard from Charlie. Surely Charlie could stop Judah from selling the farm, and then, debt or no debt, she'd take Rachel home. Then try to get her off that land. Just let them try. In her uneasy sleep, she saw the bear again, but suddenly, in the midst of its clumsy thrashing about, he threw off the pot and was transformed, leaping like a spring buck up into the loft where they were huddled, and she could not stare him down.